It was February 18th, 1965. Muhammad Ali, still known to the world as Cassius Clay, was at the peak of his boxing career. He was 23 years old, undefeated, and the heavyweight champion of the world. But more importantly, he was a devoted member of the Nation of Islam, and Malcolm X had been his mentor, his guide, and his closest friend. But by that cold February night, everything had changed. Malcolm X had broken away from the Nation of Islam. He had publicly criticized Elijah Muhammad, the organization's leader, and Muhammad Ali, pressured by the nation, had been forced to choose sides. He chose the nation. He chose to abandon his friend. The knock came at 11:47 p.m. Ali was alone in his Chicago apartment studying the Quran when he heard the urgent rapping on his door. Through the peephole, he saw a figure in a dark coat, hood pulled up, looking nervously over his shoulder. It took Ali a moment to recognize the face that had become so familiar to him over the past 3 years. "Malcolm?" Ali whispered as he opened the door. Malcolm X stepped inside quickly, pulling back his hood. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands shook as he removed his coat. "They're watching me, Ali," Malcolm said without preamble. "Every move I make, every place I go, they want me dead." Ali felt his stomach drop. Who wants you dead?" "You know who," Malcolm replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "The same people who told you to stop talking to me. The same people who made you choose between your friend and your faith." The two men stood in Ali's living room, the weight of their broken friendship hanging between them like a physical presence. For months, they hadn't spoken. The Nation of Islam had made it clear. Malcolm X was now an enemy, and any member who associated with him would face consequences. "Malcolm, Ali began, but Malcolm held up his hand. "Let me speak, brother. I may not get another chance." Malcolm walked to the window and peered through the curtains. "There's a car across the street that's been following me for weeks. Different men, same purpose. They want me gone, Ali, and they're going to succeed." Ali felt tears forming in his eyes. "Why did you have to leave? Why did you have to speak against Elijah Muhammad? You had everything. You had respect. You had power. You had—" "I had lies," Malcolm interrupted, turning from the window. "That's all I had, Ali. Beautiful, comforting lies. But when I went to Mecca, when I saw true Islam, I realized that everything we'd been taught was wrong. The white man isn't the devil. Black supremacy isn't the answer. Integration isn't impossible." Ali shook his head. "The nation saved me, Malcolm. It gave me purpose. It gave me strength. It gave you a cage," Malcolm said firmly. "A beautiful, golden cage, but a cage nonetheless. And now they're using that cage to keep you away from the truth." Malcolm reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "I want you to have this." "What is it?" "A letter. Everything I want to say to you but can't say tonight. Everything I've learned. Everything I wish I could teach you. Promise me you'll read it, but only if something happens to me." Ali stared at the envelope. Taking it felt like a betrayal of the nation, but refusing it felt like a betrayal of his friend. "Malcolm, nothing's going to happen to you. You're being paranoid." "Am I?" Malcolm pulled out a newspaper clipping. "Look at this. From last week's Muhammad Speaks." It was the Nation of Islam's official newspaper. The headline read, "Malcolm X worthy of death." Ali's blood ran cold. Muhammad Speaks was the nation's voice. If they were publicly calling for Malcolm's death, it meant the decision had already been made. "They're serious, Ali. And the worst part is, They're going to use my own people to do it. Black men, probably members of the nation, are going to kill me. And when it happens, they'll say I deserved it for betraying the movement. The two men sat down across from each other, just as they had hundreds of times before when Malcolm was teaching Ali about Islam, about black pride, about finding strength in faith. "Do you remember," Malcolm said softly, "when we first met? You were just a kid from Louisville who could fight. But you were hungry for something more than boxing. You wanted to understand who you were, where you came from." Ali nodded. "You taught me that I wasn't just Cassius Clay. You taught me I was a black man in America, and that meant something. And I was right about that. But I was wrong about so much else. The hatred I taught you, the separation I preached, the idea that we could never live in peace with other races. All of that was wrong, Ali. I've seen it with my own eyes." Malcolm leaned forward, his voice intense. "When I was in Mecca, I prayed alongside white men, black men, Arab men, Asian men. All of us equal before Allah. All of us brothers. That's true Islam, Ali. Not this Nation of Islam version that preaches racial hatred." "But Elijah Muhammad," Ali started. "Is a man," Malcolm finished. "Just a man. A flawed man who's built an empire on half-truths and full lies. He's not a prophet, Ali. He's not divine. He's just a man who's convinced you that he speaks for God." Ali felt his world shaking. Everything he believed, everything that had given his life meaning since he was 18 years old, was being challenged by the man who had first introduced him to those beliefs. "I can't," Ali said, his voice breaking. "I can't abandon everything. The nation is my family. It's my identity. Without it, who am I?" Malcolm reached across and took Ali's hands. "You're Muhammad Ali. You're the greatest boxer who ever lived. You're a young man with the power to change the world. But more than that, you're my brother. And nothing the nation says or does can change that." Tears were flowing down both men's faces now. "If I stay your friend," Ali said, "they'll kick me out. They'll take away my name, my identity, everything." "And if you don't," Malcolm replied, "you'll lose your soul." They sat in silence for several minutes, both understanding the impossible position Ali was in. Finally, Malcolm stood. "I have to go. They can't know I was here." As he put on his coat, Malcolm turned back to Ali one last time. "I want you to know something, brother. Whatever happens to me, whatever you decide to do, I forgive you. I understand the pressure you're under. I understand why you have to choose them over me, but I want you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that someday, when you're ready, you'll seek the truth for yourself. Not the nation's truth, not Elijah Muhammad's truth, but Allah's truth. Promise me you'll make the pilgrimage to Mecca and see what I saw." Ali nodded through his tears. "I promise." Malcolm smiled, the first genuine smile Ali had seen from him all night. "Good. That's all I can ask for." As Malcolm reached for the door handle, Ali called out, "Malcolm, wait!" Malcolm turned. "I love you, brother. Whatever happens, I want you to know that. I love you too, Ali, and I am proud of the man you've become, even if we're on different paths now." Malcolm X walked out into the Chicago night. 3 days later, on February 21, 1965, he was shot and killed while giving a speech at the Audubon Ballroom in Manhattan. 3 members of the Nation of Islam were eventually convicted of his murder. Muhammad Ali kept Malcolm's letter for 40 years. He never opened it while he was a member of the Nation of Islam. But, in 2005, after he had converted to mainstream Sunni Islam, after he had made his own pilgrimage to Mecca, after he had seen the same truth that Malcolm had tried to show him, Ali finally opened the envelope. The letter was simple. "My dear brother Ali, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have finally found the courage to seek the truth. I tried to share with you. I hope you have seen what I saw in Mecca. I hope you have learned what I learned about the true nature of Islam and the true brotherhood of man. I don't blame you for choosing the nation over our friendship. I understand the pressure you were under. But I hope that someday you will understand that true faith doesn't require you to hate anyone. True strength doesn't come from separating yourself from others. True Islam teaches love, not hatred. You are destined for greatness, my brother, not just in boxing, but in life. Use your platform to bring people together, not to drive them apart. Be the bridge I never could be. Your brother, in faith and in life." Malcolm, when Ali finished reading the letter, he wept for hours. In interviews later in his life, he would say that losing Malcolm X was one of his greatest regrets. "He was right about everything," Ali said. "He tried to save me from years of hatred, and I wasn't ready to listen." In 1975, exactly 10 years after Malcolm's death, Muhammad Ali made his pilgrimage to Mecca. There, surrounded by Muslims of every race and nationality, he finally understood what Malcolm had tried to tell him that night in Chicago. He saw the true face of Islam, not the racial separatism of the nation, but the universal brotherhood that Malcolm had discovered. When Ali returned from Mecca, he quietly left the Nation of Islam and converted to mainstream Sunni Islam. He never publicly criticized Elijah Muhammad or the nation, but those close to him knew that he had finally embraced the truth that Malcolm X had died trying to teach him. The story of Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X reminds us that sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who challenge us most. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the most important ones. And sometimes it takes years, even decades, to understand the wisdom someone tried to share with us. Malcolm X died believing he had lost his young protege to the very organization he was trying to save him from. But in the end, his words, his example, and his love reached Ali exactly when they were supposed to. The truth has its own timeline, and love has its own way of winning, even when it seems like it's lost forever. If this story of friendship, loss, and redemption moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the most important lessons come from the people we've lost, and sometimes the greatest honor we can give them is to finally understand what they were trying to teach us.